Hey everyone, welcome to another page in the Desert Plant Diary. In today's video, I'm going to take you guys on a plant tour of the Kalanchoe collection at home. First up, we have this very beautiful Kalanchoe, and you can see it's showing some amount of true variegation on the left. Perhaps I will snip that piece off and grow it into an independent plant in a couple of weeks. Next up, we have this Kalanchoe, which is almost like a Dagramontiana, but a miniature version of it. And I remember growing up as a child, I had the habit of walking on the way from home to school and back and picking plants that grew on the footpath or the road as well. And this is one of the plants that used to grow like crazy. It's almost like a weed and you need to keep it in check. So along the margins of the leaf, you will find these tiny plantlets, as you can see, growing, and once these drop and get onto soil, they will begin to form an independent plant. So you always need to be on your guard by making sure that you've plucked all of these tiny plantlets off, or else you will end up with a pot like this with a lot of Kalanchoes growing in it. This is almost like a weed, very easy to propagate as a species in general. Next up, we have this Kalanchoe, which could be a Kalanchoe tubiflora, but I'm pretty sure there could be another scientific name for it. Got cylindrical leaves. Now these buds that you see are of the Kalanchoe Dagramontiana, and it's packed with bud. Now this guy has got no plantlets on the edges of its leaves, which is very, very interesting. Now, I was gifted this plant by my friend Sharanya, and the plant unfortunately did get some amount of root rot and I lost it. However, in a desperate attempt to save the plant, I took one of the leaves off of it and I placed it in a pot, and it did give me a few plants. And what I have done is planted it in the soil, and all of this is off one of the plantlets of just that one leaf. This plant could be easily about, I think, 6 to 8 feet in height, and quite a lot of buds on it. Now, speaking of propagation, the Kalanchoe is one of the easiest types of plants to propagate. This is a plantlet of a Kalanchoe orgialis. Now, while trying to move the pot to a different area in the garden, a part of the leaf had fallen off, not the complete leaf, just a piece of it, and I placed this in this teacup over here, planning to come around later to planting it or putting it in soil. However, I did forget that. Nonetheless, you can see that a new plantlet, or a couple of them, have begun to grow off of this. All you will need to do now is just stick this in soil and it will be an established plant. And talking about not needing an entire leaflet or leaf, you can see over here, this is a piece of the Kalanchoe tomentosa that broke off from one of the plants I bought at a recent show, and that is beginning to form a plantlet on it too. So you don't need an entire leaflet, as is the case with most of the succulents. So just a piece of it and you will get, if not one, a couple of plants off them. Now this is the Kalanchoe humilis, a very, very beautiful colored Kalanchoe. And that's in bud now. And once this once this bloom is done with its cycle, you will have seeds that form in this plant. And all you will need to do is to take that and scatter it on soil, and it very, very easily begins to germinate and propagate. Next up, we have the Kalanchoe, and this is the Gastonis bonnerii, a very interesting Kalanchoe again. And now what this guy does to ensure its own survival is it drops the white powdery substance on the surface of the soil to ensure that if any of the plantlets fall near its root system, they will not survive, because the white powder that falls off ensures that it kills any of the plantlets that are around it. And the way in which this propagates is by forming plantlets at the edge or the tip of the leaf. I have not seen this particular plant form many plantlets on its edges, but it's quite a possibility. Next up, we have a Kalanchoe that looks like a Kalanchoe. That's a recent cutting. Almost a chocolate brown color. And next up, we have a Kalanchoe Sinsapala. Now this has a very interesting way of propagating itself to ensure its survival. It forms these large tentacle-like structures at the end of which you will find a plantlet. Now this is a very interesting mechanism, perhaps devised by the plant to ensure that it doesn't have any root competition or competition for nutrition. All you will need to do is to just cut off the tip of this plant. As you can see in the second plantlet formed over here, there are roots beginning to form on it. So all you will need to do is to just cut this part of the stem off, place that on top of soil, and that will form a root system and establish itself. Now at the bottom over here you can see that the plant has begun to get a little rotten, and there is a plantlet that's forming on that too. Next up we have this Kalanchoe Milliotii, an unknown Kalanchoe that looks a bit like the Kalanchoe, but I'm not sure of the name. It's got a very, very beautiful red edge to it, and almost a powdery blue look on its surface of the leaves. Now this plant has very, very interestingly decided to propagate itself from a bloom spike. So there was just one bud that formed on top of the bloom spike which had opened, and a lot of plantlets have begun to form around it. An interesting fact about the Kalanchoe, most of the Kalanchoe blooms, is that they will have full petals, very definitive of the species. Next up we have the very, very beautiful Kalanchoe augialis, also nicknamed the copper spoon. And these guys keep their color even if they are in an area where they don't get too much sunlight but not complete shade. Do excuse the newspaper on the bottom, guys. The reason why I've kept that is because I wanted to ensure when I take these plants off, some of them were pulled out of quarantine to make the video. So if they have anything, I don't want the disease to be left on the surface of the wall when I place other pots over here. Next up, this dinky little fellow is another Kalanchoe, perhaps the Marmorata. And I got this guy when he was just that tiny, one of the leaflets off of the parent plant. And he's grown up quite beautifully. It's about time I repotted him. And if I remember correctly, I think that this is the Mexican hat. Next we have an assortment of Kalanchoe tomentosas, one of my favorites when it comes to this type of plant, or the Kalanchoes. First up we have the Kalanchoe tomentosa, the regular one, which in terms of its morphology has green fuzzy leaves and almost burgundy red, dark red or black or whatever you want to call the color on the tips of the leaves. Now an easy way to propagate this is to take one of the leaves off of this plant, and you can place it on soil, and you will get plantlets form at this point of the leaf. I've forgotten that. Of course, you could also propagate this from cuttings, of which this one is. It was a cutting when I placed it here. Next up we have another Kalanchoe tomentosa. The cultivar name is hairy, and the plant is quite hairy too. In fact, if you use the delicate part of your hand to brush against it, it almost pokes you. Now this guy I thought was a variation from this Kalanchoe, because it did have lighter markings on the edges of the leaf, not as dark, but as the new growth has begun to form over the past 2 months, it's beginning to look a lot more like the regular Kalanchoe tomentosa. A beautiful one nonetheless. Next up we have the Kalanchoe tomentosa, perhaps the nigricans. A very, very beautiful guy. When I first bought him, he was way darker than this, almost like someone took a piece of charcoal or a black marker and just decided to go to town with him. The very, very famous Kalanchoe tomentosa chocolate soldier. and I'm looking forward to adding 2 more to the collection. The very popular Kalanchoe Teddy and the Kalanchoe Cinnamon. Very beautiful plants. Next up we have this very huge Kalanchoe beharensis, also called the felt bush because of its felt-like texture. And this is a very, very large specimen in this pot, growing with the Euphorbia tyricalii, that decided to hitch a ride with this pot. If placed in the ground, this plant can grow to be about 10 feet, if not more, and has very, very interesting architectural kind of structure to it. Almost looks like something that stepped out of an ancient movie where once dinosaurs roamed the earth. Now this guy is a different form of the Kalanchoe beharensis, and if placed in sunlight, it does get some kind of dark brown coloration to it. And when I bought that was called the Crux, C-R-U-X. Next up, one of my favorites is the Kalanchoe luciae, also called Fantastic. And why wouldn't it be named Fantastic with the color that it displays? Now this guy was purchased about 3 to 4 weeks ago, and I had it in a quarantined area, as is with this plant too, which has been with me for 2 months, and I quarantined him as well. And this guy was in a sunnier spot, and all of the old leaves have turned red. Perhaps in the greenhouse it was in a sheltered place with a controlled environment. But now he's finally learned to adapt, and you can see its natural leaf color beginning to show up, and also some beautiful variegation on it. So that's pretty much all of the plants I've got for you guys today. And I hope you guys see all of these plants and get inspired to start or continue a collection of your own. And I thank you guys for watching, sending you a lot of strength and inspiration to step out in your garden today, get your plant mojo on, and do something fantastic. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers. You have a fantastic week.